When Catherine Mitchell scraped together her last few dollars for a mail-order husband, she wasn't just buying a man, she was buying a miracle. Her family ranch, a sprawling but failing piece of 1897 Montana, was on the brink of collapse. The bank was circling like a vulture, and a ruthless cattle baron named Carson Blackwood was ready to pick the bones clean. She needed a strong back, calloused hands, a man who knew the land. Instead, the man who stepped off the train from Boston was a ghost. His name was Benjamin Hayes. He was thin, with hands as soft as a preacher's, and clothes that looked like they'd lost a fight with a laundry mangle. He carried a single shabby suitcase that seemed to hold nothing but disappointment. This frail, scholarly man wasn't the savior she'd paid for. He was the final nail in her coffin. As Catherine steeled herself to send this useless man back on the morning train, she had no idea what was hidden beneath his threadbare coat. Benjamin Hayes wasn't just carrying a suitcase. He was carrying a secret, an explosive secret that wouldn't just save her ranch. It would ignite a war that would burn through the entire valley and change everything and everyone forever. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you think Catherine should have sent him packing right then and there, hit that like button. Now let's get back to the story. Catherine had never been a gambling woman, but desperation changes the rules. She guided the wagon away from the Riverbrook station, the stranger sitting stiffly beside her, a constant, silent reminder of her bad bet. This was supposed to be her husband, her partner, her salvation. Benjamin Hayes clutched his suitcase, his sharp eyes scanning the vast, unforgiving Montana landscape. Catherine couldn't read his expression. Was it fear, disappointment, or something else entirely? Something like calculation? Whatever it was, it did nothing to untie the knot of pure regret in her gut. The ranch is about 3 miles ahead, she said, her voice as brittle as a dead leaf. Mitchell land. Been in my family for 30 years. My father was one of the first to settle this valley. Benjamin just nodded. Your letters mentioned 200 acres. 240, she corrected, a sharp edge to her voice. Though Carson Blackwood would have you believe it's all his. His cattle have been accidentally grazing my south pasture for months. The neighboring rancher you mentioned? Benjamin asked. At least he'd read her letters. Neighboring is too kind a word. Blackwood owns half the valley and wants the rest. He's been buying up every struggling homestead since the drought hit. She flicked the reins, a sudden chill wind sweeping down from the mountains, mirroring the chill in her heart. My father built something that matters here. I won't be the one who loses it. As they crested a rise, the ranch came into view. A solid 2-story farmhouse, a large barn with a sagging roof, and acres of pasture that looked like a graveyard under a thin blanket of snow. To Catherine, it was home. It was legacy. It was everything. She could only imagine what it looked like to him. It's extensive, he offered, his voice diplomatic. Catherine almost let out a bitter laugh. It's falling apart, Mr. Hayes. Let's not waste time with polite lies. The south barn needs a new roof. The irrigation ditches are clogged, and the north fence line won't keep a determined sheep in, let alone Blackwood's cattle. She pulled the wagon to a halt. This is why I needed a husband, a partner who knows ranching. Benjamin climbed down, his movements careful, almost delicate. Up close, she saw the gray at his temples, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of hardship, not age. He looked older than the 40 she'd guessed. Your letters mention farming experience in Pennsylvania, she said, the doubt thick in her voice. I have some experience with land, he replied, his Boston accent sounding painfully out of place. It was the voice of a librarian, not a rancher. Catherine sighed, a puff of white in the cold air. This was a mistake, a catastrophic, expensive mistake. She led him inside where her housekeeper Martha had left a pot of stew warming on the stove. The small guest room was ready. You'll stay here tonight, Catherine said, all business. Tomorrow we can discuss arrangements. Benjamin set his suitcase down. His gaze was unnervingly direct. You're reconsidering our agreement. It wasn't a question. She appreciated that. Mr. Hayes, I needed someone who could wrestle this ranch back from the grave. Someone who knows cattle and crops and the kind of work that breaks your back and fills your belly. She gestured vaguely at him. You're not that person. You mean I'm not what you expected? He countered, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so. Not big enough. Not strong enough. She felt a flush of embarrassment but shoved it down. This isn't about appearances. It's about survival. The bank has given me until spring planting to show a profit. If I don't, they foreclose. And Carson Blackwood will be standing right there, cash in hand, to buy it for pennies on the dollar. Benjamin moved to the window, looking out at the dying light on the snow. Your letters didn't mention the situation was quite this dire. Would you have come if they had? She challenged. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. Probably. I have my own reasons for leaving Boston. He turned back to her, his face a mask. So, what do you propose? She had rehearsed this on the ride from the station. I'll provide lodging for the night. Tomorrow I'll buy your return ticket to Boston. We'll say the arrangement was dissolved by mutual agreement. His expression didn't change. And you'll face the bank in Blackwood alone. I've managed alone since my father died 3 years ago. Not well enough to save the ranch by your own admission. The words stung because they were true. She turned away, ladling stew into bowls, her movements jerky. We'll talk more in the morning. You must be tired. They ate in a silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. Martha, the housekeeper, tried her best. She'd been with the family since Catherine was a girl and had a determined optimism that Catherine usually loved, but tonight found grating. Mr. Hayes, what did you do in Boston? Martha asked, serving up a slice of apple pie that had used up the last of their sugar. I worked for a mining company, he said. Administrative duties. A clerk. Catherine's heart sank even further. Something like that, he added, taking a sip of water. Before that, I studied geology at Harvard. The word hung in the air. Harvard. You're college educated? Catherine pressed, thrown off balance. I am. And a Harvard man answers an advertisement for a mail-order husband on a failing Montana ranch? The pieces didn't fit. None of them. For the first time, Benjamin met her gaze with an intensity that startled her. We all have our reasons for seeking new beginnings, Miss Mitchell. I respected your privacy enough not to question why a woman would advertise for a husband. Perhaps you might extend me the same courtesy. The gentle rebuke hit its mark. She fell silent. Later, after Martha had gone to bed, they sat in the parlor, the fire crackling between them, doing nothing to warm the icy silence. The morning stage leaves at 8, Catherine said finally. We'll need to leave by 7. Benjamin had been studying a large geological survey map of the territory that hung on the wall. He turned to her, his face unreadable. Before you buy that ticket, Miss Mitchell, I'd like to propose an alternative. She folded her arms. I'm listening. Give me 1 week, he said. 7 days. To prove I can be of some value. Not as a husband. I understand that's off the table. But as a partner. What kind of partner? The kind who might have skills you haven't considered. He walked to the map, his finger tracing the mountain range that bordered her property to the north, the worthless part of her property. Your ranch is strategically located. There may be opportunities here you haven't explored. She let out that bitter laugh again. Mr. Hayes, I've explored every option. Cattle prices are in the dirt. The soil's too rocky for big crops. What do you think you can find in 7 days that I haven't found in 3 years? His calm was maddening. Perhaps nothing. In which case, you've lost a week and gained 7 days of free labor. I'm stronger than I look, and I can learn. She studied him, trying to see past the patched clothes and the quiet confidence. He wasn't a con man. They were charming. He was just steady. Why? She asked. Why stay when I've already rejected you? For the first time, his composure cracked. Just for a second, a flicker of raw vulnerability crossed his face. Because I have nowhere else to go, he said, the words stripped bare of any pretense. Boston holds nothing for me. And despite your assessment, Miss Mitchell, I do possess knowledge that could be valuable, just not the kind you were expecting. The honesty of it hit her like a physical blow. That she understood. The desperate need for a place, a purpose. It was the same reason she was still fighting for this godforsaken ranch. 1 week, she heard herself say. The words felt like they were coming from someone else. But you work. The north pasture fence needs mending, and Martha needs firewood chopped for the month. Relief washed over his face, softening his features. Agreed. And understand this, she warned. At the end of that week, if I don't see any value in this, you're on that train. No arguments. Perfectly clear, he said, extending his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was surprisingly firm, the skin rougher than she'd thought. Maybe there was more to him, or maybe she was just a drowning woman grabbing onto a piece of driftwood. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling she'd just made another terrible bet. What she couldn't possibly know was that Benjamin Hayes hadn't been entirely honest about his past, or about what had really brought him to her ranch. Because hidden in his shabby suitcase, beneath the worn clothes, wasn't just a secret. It was a map, a different kind of map. And it showed a treasure buried right under her feet, a treasure he'd seen hints of from the train window as it pulled into the station. And if he was right, it was a treasure worth killing for. Catherine woke before the sun, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Giving a week to that man felt like giving a year to a dying man. Pointless. She dressed in her work clothes, sturdy trousers hidden beneath a practical woolen skirt. When she got downstairs, the kitchen was already warm. Coffee was brewing, and Benjamin Hayes was sitting at the table, a notebook open, sketching something with a worn pencil. He stood when she entered. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell. Martha's arthritis was acting up. I told her I'd start breakfast." He gestured to biscuits baking in the oven. A geologist, a clerk, and now a cook. The man was a walking contradiction. Before she could question him, he closed his notebook. "I thought I might ride out to examine your North Ridge today," he said casually. "You mentioned fence repairs were needed there." The North Ridge, the worthless part of her ranch. Why was he so interested in that pile of rocks? "The priority is the fence bordering Blackwood's property," she corrected him. "That's where the trouble is." "Of course," he said, "but when time permits." "Why the North Ridge?" she pressed. "It's useless for grazing." He hesitated, choosing his words like a man picking his way through a minefield. "I noticed some unusual geological formations on the ride in. Sometimes anomalies like that can indicate valuable resources." She snorted. "If you're thinking of gold, you're about 30 years too late." "Not gold," he said quietly. "Something else. Something potentially more valuable in the long run." Before she could ask what, the back door flew open with a blast of icy air. It was Sam Wilson, Carson Blackwood's foreman, a brute of a man who walked into her house like he already owned it. He stomped the snow from his boots, his eyes full of contempt as they landed on Catherine, then shifted to Benjamin. "This the husband you sent for?" Wilson sneered. "Looks like you got shorted on the delivery." Catherine's spine went rigid. "State your business, Wilson. I have work to do." Wilson grinned, a nasty sight. "Just being neighborly. Mr. Blackwood wanted to remind you his offer still stands. Fair market value for this place before the bank takes it for nothing." "The bank isn't taking anything," she snapped. "And my answer's the same. The Mitchell Ranch is not for sale." "Suit yourself," Wilson shrugged. "Might want to check your north pasture, though. Seems some of your cattle broke through that fence again. They're on Blackwood land." Her stomach turned to ice. "My cattle didn't break through anything. Your men cut that wire." "Prove it," Wilson challenged, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. A casual, deadly threat. "In the meantime, Mr. Blackwood is charging $10 a head for feed. You can settle up at the main house, or we'll just keep the cattle as payment." It was extortion, plain and simple. She couldn't lose those cattle, but she didn't have the money to pay his bogus fees. She was trapped. Then Benjamin spoke, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the tension. "Perhaps Mr. Blackwood would accept a written agreement instead. A promissory note." Wilson turned, finally seeming to notice Benjamin as more than just a piece of furniture. "And who the hell are you?" "Benjamin Hayes," he said smoothly. "Miss Mitchell's business partner." The words hung in the air. Business partner. Wilson's laugh was a harsh bark. "A lady rancher with a city man for a partner. Blackwood's gonna love that." "I'm glad we can provide some amusement," Benjamin replied, his tone mild. "A formal agreement would simply document the disputed fees. It would also establish a paper trail of these incidents, something the county sheriff might find interesting." Something about Benjamin's quiet confidence seemed to rattle the big foreman. Wilson shifted his weight, his eyes narrowing. He was used to dealing with anger and fear, not calm logic. Blackwood don't deal in paper, Wilson snarled. Cash or cattle. He turned to leave, but his eyes fixed on Benjamin. A word of advice, city man. Whatever she's paying you, it ain't worth crossing Carson Blackwood. This valley has a way of swallowing up outsiders who don't know their place. The door slammed shut behind him. Catherine slammed her coffee cup on the table. He did this on purpose. It's the third time this winter. You mentioned he wants your land, Benjamin said thoughtfully. Why not just sell? The question, so reasonable, lit her fuse. This isn't just land, she exploded. My father built this from nothing. My mother died in that room giving birth to me. Their graves are on that hill. I will not sell their dream to a monster like Carson Blackwood. Benjamin just nodded, his gaze steady, accepting her fire without judgment. Then we should retrieve your cattle. We, she echoed. I may not look like a rancher, but I can ride, he said, and 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. An hour later, they were riding toward the north pasture. Catherine was surprised to see that he handled his horse with a quiet competence. As they rode, his eyes weren't on the horizon. They were on the ground, on the rocks, on the very shape of the land itself. Your father chose this location well, he remarked. The water access alone is valuable. Sweetwater Creek, she said. It runs year-round. That's why Blackwood wants this place so bad. His pastures go dry every summer. They found the fence line. The wire wasn't broken. It was cut. Cleanly. No cow did this, she said, her voice grim. Benjamin knelt, not just looking at the wire, but sifting the soil through his fingers. Boot prints, he confirmed, and the cattle tracks. They were driven through, not wandering. He looked up at her, and she saw a flicker of something new in his eyes. Respect. They crossed onto Blackwood's land, following the tracks. They found the cattle in a small box canyon, a single young ranch hand dozing on his horse, guarding them. It was a local boy, Jimmy. He looked terrified when he saw them. Miss Mitchell? He stammered. Mr. Wilson said they broke through. Did you see them break through, Jimmy? Benjamin asked, his voice gentle but firm. The boy squirmed. I just follow orders. Of course you do, Benjamin said. But here's another order for you. Ride back and tell Mr. Blackwood that Miss Mitchell is filing a formal complaint with the county sheriff for cattle rustling. Montana territorial law is quite clear on the penalties. The calm authority in his voice, the mention of the law, did what threats never could. Jimmy paled, wheeled his horse, and galloped away as if the devil himself were chasing him. As they herded the cattle back, Catherine studied the man beside her. You sound like you know the law. Knowledge is the most effective weapon against men like Blackwood, he said vaguely. Knowledge doesn't fix offense, she countered. He reined in his horse, his gaze fixed on that same worthless ridge to the north. Perhaps not, he agreed, but it can reveal opportunities where others only see obstacles. He turned to her, a sudden, sharp decisiveness in his eyes. Miss Mitchell, after we secure these cattle, I need your permission to survey that ridge. I believe there is something up there. What could possibly be up there but rocks and snakes? For the first time since he arrived, Benjamin Hayes let out a full, genuine smile. It changed his whole face, erasing years of hardship. That, Miss Mitchell, he said, his voice ringing with a strange excitement, is precisely the point. He wasn't just looking at rocks. He was looking at a treasure chest, and he believed he was the only one with the key, but he was wrong. Someone else was watching, someone who knew the valley's secrets just as well as he did, and they were about to make their move. After mending the fence, a job Benjamin proved surprisingly good at, they rode for the North Ridge. The air grew colder as they climbed, leaving the fertile valley floor for the rocky, barren landscape Catherine had always ignored. Her father used to call it the backbone of their land. Good for nothing but holding the rest of it together, he'd say. But Benjamin wasn't seeing a backbone. He was reading a story written in stone. He dismounted frequently, cracking rocks open, examining the soil, his movements becoming more urgent, more excited. What are you looking for? Catherine finally demanded, her patience wearing thin. He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to a deep, narrow ravine a few hundred yards away. There, he said, his voice tight. We need to go there. The ravine was like a wound in the earth, its walls exposing layers of rock like a sliced cake. The temperature dropped as they entered its shadows. Benjamin handed her his reins and walked to the rock wall as if it were an altar. He traced the layers of stone with his fingers, his breath coming faster. Incredible, he muttered to himself. It's just as I suspected. Mr. Hayes, she said exasperated, I don't have time for a geology lesson. Tell me what's going on, or we're going back. He turned to her, his eyes blazing with an intensity she'd never seen before. Miss Mitchell, what powers the Industrial Revolution? What single resource is the lifeblood of every factory, every railroad, every steel mill in this country? The answer dawned on her slowly, a flicker of impossible hope. Coal, she whispered. You think there's coal here? He grinned, a wild, triumphant look on his face. He pointed to a dark, glossy seam running through the rock face. Not just any coal. These formations indicate anthracite, the hardest, cleanest, most valuable coal on Earth. He ran his hand along the black seam. This is just the edge of it. The main deposit likely runs for miles, deep beneath this entire ridge. Catherine stared at the black line in the rock. It looked so ordinary. Could this worthless piece of her ranch actually be a gold mine? A coal mine? If it's here, why has no one found it before? She asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Because government surveyors are looking for farmland, not this, he explained. You need to know what you're looking for. The geology of this ridge is remarkably similar to the richest coal fields in Pennsylvania. The ones I studied at Harvard, he paused, and the ones I worked for Barrett Mining Corporation. The name hit her like a thunderclap. Barrett Mining was a giant, an eastern behemoth known for its wealth and its ruthlessness. You worked for Barrett Mining, she stated flatly, the pieces clicking into a strange, unbelievable new picture. And you ended up answering an ad for a mail-order husband? His smile vanished. My relationship with Barrett ended poorly. He turned back to the rock wall. I discovered things. Safety shortcuts that were getting men killed, water supplies being poisoned. I couldn't stay silent. They fired you, she guessed. Worse, he said quietly. They blacklisted me. After I took my evidence to a state inspector, they used their power to destroy me. They owned politicians, judges, newspapers. They ruined my reputation, made sure no one in the East would ever hire me again. Suddenly, Benjamin Hayes wasn't a failure. He was a man of principle who had lost everything for doing the right thing. He was a man her father would have respected. So you came west, she said, understanding now, to start over. Your advertisement seemed like a sign, he admitted, a remote place, far from their reach. Her mind was spinning. A fortune. Right here. Enough to pay off the bank, to fix the barn, to tell Carson Blackwood to go straight to hell. How certain are you? I'd stake what's left of my professional reputation on it, he said. What would it take to prove it? To be sure? Core samples, test drilling, equipment we don't have, he said. But there might be another way. We don't need to mine it ourselves. We just need to prove it's here. And then what? We prepare a geological assessment. Maps, samples. We take it to smaller independent mining companies. We don't sell the land, he corrected her before she could even ask. We lease the mineral rights. You get a large payment up front, enough to solve your problems with the bank, plus royalties on every ton of coal that comes out of the ground. You get immediate cash and a lifetime of income. The idea was intoxicating, but she had seen what mines did to the land. I won't destroy my father's ranch for money. You wouldn't have to, he assured her. That was my fight with Barrett. They refused to use modern, safer extraction methods. We can write the lease to ensure the mining is contained entirely to this ridge, protecting your water and your grazing land. She looked across her property, the setting sun turning the snow-capped mountains pink and gold. It was a new world, a world of possibility, but a question still burned in her mind. Why are you telling me this? She asked, her voice sharp. With what you know, you could have kept quiet, let the bank foreclose, and bought the land yourself for nothing. He looked genuinely surprised, then a slow smile spread across his face. A fair question. The answer is simple. I may have lost my career, but I haven't lost my principles. Deceiving you for my own gain would make me no better than the men at Barrett. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she felt she could see the man, not the mystery. Besides, he added wryly, I'm broke. She had to ask. And what do you want from this? If it works? A partnership, he said without hesitation. I provide the expertise. You provide the land. We split the profits equally after your debts are cleared. Equal partners. Yesterday she was going to put him on a train. Today he was offering her salvation and asking to be her equal. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was the only hope she had. I need to think, she said. Of course, he nodded, but time isn't on our side. If I can recognize these signs, eventually someone else will too. He paused, his expression hardening. Someone like Blackwood. I saw his foreman, Wilson, paying very close attention to this ridge this morning. The implication hit her like a punch to the gut. If Blackwood even suspected what was here, his harassment would turn into an all-out war. He wouldn't just try to buy her land. He would try to take it, by any means necessary. As they rode back to the ranch, the world had changed. The man beside her was no longer a disappointment. He was an asset, a weapon, and a risk. Trusting him was a gamble, maybe the biggest one of her life. But Catherine Mitchell was a gambling woman now, and she was about to go all in. The next morning she found Benjamin and Martha huddled over her father's old desk, surrounded by yellowed maps and property deeds. Martha mentioned your father kept detailed records, Benjamin said, looking up as she entered. He was meticulous. He never mentioned coal, Catherine said, pouring a cup of coffee. He wouldn't have known the term, Benjamin explained, pointing to a notation on an old survey map. But look here, Carboniferous formations. To a surveyor in 1868, that just meant poor soil. To a geologist, it's a giant red flag. It screams coal. Martha nodded. Your father always said this North Ridge would be good for something someday. He just didn't know what. Suddenly, Catherine remembered how her father had stubbornly refused every offer to sell off that useless piece of land. It wasn't just pride. He must have suspected something. What's our next move? She asked Benjamin, her voice firm. This was real now. We need to get core samples to prove the depth and quality of the seam, he said. I've sketched a design for a rudimentary core drill. The blacksmith in town might be able to build it. Tom Bailey, Catherine said. He owes me a favor. I can handle that. Good, Benjamin said. In the meantime, I need to discreetly contact some ethical mining operators I know, men who might be interested in a new venture. We need to move before Blackwood realizes what we're doing. And the bank, she reminded him. The payment is due in 3 weeks. We need to buy time, he decided. Present them with our preliminary findings. The potential for mineral development might persuade them to grant an extension. Just then, the sound of hoofbeats echoed in the yard. Catherine looked out the window. Her blood ran cold. It's the sheriff, she said, quickly gathering the maps. And he's not alone. Sheriff Mike Donnelly was a fair man, but he was also Carson Blackwood's cousin by marriage. He stood on her porch, hat in hand, with a younger, stern-faced man in a dusty suit. Miss Mitchell, the sheriff said, hope I'm not intruding. Just wanted to introduce Deputy Marshal out of the Helena Land Office. He's here conducting routine verification of property boundaries. Routine. There was nothing routine about this. The marshal stepped forward, his eyes cold and official. We're surveying all properties in the valley, ma'am. Standard procedure. Particularly interested in your northern boundary. The northern boundary. The North Ridge. This was Blackwood's doing. He was using the law to poke around her property. Benjamin stepped forward, his demeanor calm and professional. The North Ridge boundaries were established by the Territorial Survey of 1868. Natural features, such as the ridge itself, often serve as legal demarcation points in such terrain. The marshal's eyes narrowed, surprised by Benjamin's articulate response. You seem to know a lot about land law, Mr. Hayes. I've studied various legal frameworks, Benjamin replied smoothly. The sheriff cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. At any rate, Miss Mitchell, the marshal needs to ride your property lines, and standard procedure requires the landowner to accompany him. It was a trap, a delay tactic, a way for Blackwood's man to get a look at the very land they were trying to protect. "I'd be happy to accompany the deputy marshal," Benjamin offered unexpectedly. "As Miss Mitchell's business partner, it's essential I familiarize myself with the property's boundaries." Catherine shot him a look, but he gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He had a plan. The sheriff and the marshal, caught off guard, couldn't find a reason to object. As the men rode off toward the North Ridge, Catherine knew she had to move fast. She hitched the wagon and headed for town, a sense of dread hanging over her. This wasn't just a race against the bank anymore. It was a race against Blackwood. Tom Bailey, the blacksmith, listened intently as she showed him Benjamin's diagram in the smoky heat of his forge. "Mining gear?" he whispered, his bushy eyebrows shooting up. "We think there's something on the North Ridge, Tom." "Something big," she said. "But we need proof, and we need it fast." Blackwood's already sniffing around. Bailey's jaw tightened. "Carson Blackwood doesn't miss a trick. That man has eyes and ears everywhere." He studied the diagram again. "This is clever. I can make it, but it'll take a few days." "We don't have a few days, Tom." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "I've got parts from an old well drill I can adapt. Come back tomorrow afternoon. I'll have something for you." He looked her dead in the eye. "And if anyone asks, I'm fixing a broken plow for you." Her next stop was the bank. The manager, Frank Spencer, was a man who oozed false sincerity. He was known to be in Blackwood's pocket. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted her, a smug look on his face. "Come about the pending payment, have you?" "I've come to request a 30-day extension," she said, choosing her words carefully. "We have identified potential mineral resources on the property that could significantly increase its value." Spencer's smug look flickered into one of cautious interest. "Mineral resources? What kind?" "We're conducting assessments now," she said vaguely. "My business partner, Mr. Hayes, has extensive experience in the field." "Ah, yes, the partner," Spencer said, leaning back. "Carson Blackwood mentioned you had a visitor from the east." The casual remark confirmed it. Spencer was a spy. "I might consider a 2-week extension," he said, tapping his fingers on the desk, "if you provide documented proof of these alleged findings. Something substantial." It was less than she'd hoped for, but it was something. It was time. When she got back to the ranch, it was nearly dusk. Benjamin was waiting on the porch, his face grim. "What happened?" she asked, her heart pounding. "The marshal wasn't surveying boundaries," he said, his voice low. "He was a geologist. He knew exactly what to look for. He asked pointed questions about separating mineral rights from surface ownership." The meaning was terrifyingly clear. "They're not trying to buy my land anymore," Catherine whispered, the pieces falling into place. "They're trying to find a legal loophole to steal the coal from right under my feet." "Precisely," Benjamin confirmed. "They want to leave you with a worthless ranch while they get rich off your resources." He pulled out his notebook. "But I've mapped the 3 most promising sites for drilling. Tom Bailey came through. The equipment is in the barn." "Blackwood's foreman was in town asking questions," she told him. "And Martha said one of his young ranch hands was spying on the house all afternoon." They were surrounded. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. "Then we work tonight," Benjamin said, his jaw set, "under the cover of darkness." That night, they hauled the makeshift drill up the treacherous slope of the North Ridge. It was backbreaking work. They set up in the ravine, working by the light of a single, shielded lantern. Benjamin operated the hand-crank drill, his body straining with effort, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold. For hours, there was only the sound of grinding metal against rock. Then suddenly the drill bit sank. They'd broken through. Benjamin carefully extracted the core sample, a long cylinder of rock. He held it up to the lantern light. Layers of sandstone, shale, and then a thick 14-inch band of glossy jet-black coal. "Anthracite," he breathed, his voice filled with awe. He broke off a piece and struck it against the drill. It sparked brilliantly. "High quality. Seams half this thick are considered profitable back east." He looked at her, the lantern light dancing in his eyes. "If the whole ridge is like this, Catherine, you're not just sitting on a fortune. You're sitting on an empire." They drilled 2 more holes before dawn, each one confirming their discovery. The coal seam was massive. Exhausted but exhilarated, they returned to the ranch as the first rays of sun touched the mountains. They had the proof. They had a fighting chance. As they were hiding the samples in her father's study, Martha burst in, her face pale with terror. "He's here," she whispered. "Carson Blackwood. He just rode up, and he's not alone." Catherine ran to the window. Blackwood was dismounting in her yard, flanked by Wilson and 3 other armed men. He wasn't dressed for ranch work. He was dressed in his Sunday best, like a man attending a funeral. Hers. He walked to her front door with the confident stride of a man who had already won. The game of whispers and spies was over. This was the final move. "Hide the samples," Catherine hissed, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "And your notes. Now." Benjamin swept the precious evidence off the desk as Catherine walked to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She opened it to find Carson Blackwood standing on her porch, a predatory smile on his face that didn't reach his cold, dead eyes. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice smooth as poison, "I hope I'm not calling at an inconvenient hour." "What do you want, Blackwood?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. "Neighborly concern," he purred, his eyes flicking past her to Benjamin, who now stood in the hallway behind her. "You must be Mr. Hayes, the geologist from Boston." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. Geologist. He knew. He didn't just suspect. He knew. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Hayes," Blackwood continued, stepping into her parlor uninvited. He ran a finger over the desk, noting the faint traces of rock dust. "You've had a busy night, I see." The game was over. He had been one step ahead of them the entire time. "I'm aware of what you found on the North Ridge," Blackwood said, getting straight to the point. "Anthracite. Valuable. I'm here to make you a fair offer before things get complicated." "Complicated how?" Catherine challenged, her voice shaking with rage. "Mining requires capital, Miss Mitchell. Capital you don't have. It requires political connections, which you certainly don't have." He sat in her father's favorite chair as if he owned it. "And it requires a clean title, which, given your outstanding loan at the bank, is very much in question." He laid his trap out for them to see. "What's your offer?" Benjamin asked, his voice a low growl. $20,000, Blackwood said, "for the mineral rights to the North Ridge. You keep the ranch, the surface land. The money clears your debt and leaves you with a handsome profit." It was a fortune, more money than she'd ever seen, but she knew instinctively it was a fraction of what the coal was worth. It was a thief's offer. "And if we decline?" she asked. Blackwood's smile faded. "Miss Mitchell, I admire your grit, but this is a world you don't understand. The law has ways of favoring those with established interests." He stood, his presence filling the room with menace. "My offer expires in 3 days." He paused at the door. "Oh, and Mr. Hayes, I took the liberty of sending a telegram to your former employers, Barrett Mining. They seem very interested to learn of your whereabouts. Something about unresolved matters." The threat was clear. He wasn't just threatening her ranch. He was threatening Benjamin's life. After he left, the silence in the room was suffocating. "He knows everything," Catherine whispered. "Not everything," Benjamin corrected, his face grim. "He knows there's coal, but he doesn't know how much or how good it is. That's our only advantage." "And his threat against you?" she asked. "What unresolved matters?" Benjamin's face darkened. "It's more than just the safety violations. I found evidence of financial crimes. Fraud, embezzlement, going all the way to the top. I was set to testify. The night before my office burned down, all the original evidence was destroyed. They tried to frame me for it. The man she thought was a weakling, a clerk, had taken on one of the most powerful corporations in the country and had barely escaped with his life. Blackwood's 3-day deadline was a death sentence. They couldn't find an investor in 3 days. They were trapped. "There's one last chance," Catherine said, an idea sparking in the darkness. A desperate, wild, impossible idea. "The territorial governor. He's in Helena for a railroad commission meeting. He's known for despising monopolists like Blackwood. Helena is a 4-day ride, Benjamin said. 3, she corrected him, if we take the shortcut through Blackwater Pass. That pass is treacherous this time of year, he warned. So is Carson Blackwood, she shot back. It was their only move, a race against time, with their lives and the future of the ranch on the line. As they prepared to leave at dawn, Martha pressed a sealed envelope into Catherine's hand. It's from your father, she said quietly, a letter to Governor Davis. They served together in the war. Your father saved his life. He said to only use it in the greatest of need. Catherine stared at the letter, another secret from a father she thought she knew. It felt like a ghost's hand reaching out to help them. They rode out as the sun rose, not taking the main road, but a hidden trail leading east into the mountains. They knew Blackwood would be watching. They had to be faster. They had to be smarter. They reached Campbell Creek by midday, the water roaring with spring melt. As they led the horses across a makeshift log bridge, the crack of a rifle echoed through the canyon. A bullet splintered the tree right beside Catherine's head. Ambush. They dove for cover as more shots rained down from the ridge above. They were pinned down, exposed. They knew we'd come this way, Catherine yelled over the gunfire. Benjamin, surprisingly, was calm. He had pulled a revolver from his coat, a weapon she hadn't known he carried. I'll provide covering fire, he said, his voice steady. There's a ravine 50 yards upriver. Get the horses there. Go! He rose, firing with a speed and accuracy that was shocking. He wasn't a clerk. He wasn't just a geologist. Who was this man? Catherine scrambled for the ravine, dragging the terrified horses. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. She made it to cover and started firing back, allowing Benjamin to retreat. He ran, dodging and weaving with an agility that defied his scholarly appearance. They were trapped in the ravine, but they were alive. They'll try to flank us, she said, her breath coming in ragged gasps. We have to keep moving. They pushed on, deeper into the mountains, the terrain growing more brutal with every step. They were cold, exhausted, and hunted. That night they made a small, hidden camp, huddled together for warmth against the biting wind. You handle a gun better than any geologist I've ever met, she said, trying to force a smile. My grandfather believed a man should be able to navigate a ballroom, a boardroom, and a battlefield with equal skill, he replied, a faint smile on his own face. In the firelight, she looked at this man who had come into her life by chance. This quiet, unassuming man who was proving to be the bravest, most resourceful person she had ever known. The partnership that had started as a desperate business deal was becoming something more, something deeper. They were no longer just partners. They were survivors. The next 2 days were a blur of exhaustion and fear. They pushed themselves and their horses to the breaking point, evading Blackwood's men, navigating treacherous passes, driven by the single thought of reaching Helena before it was too late. They arrived looking like ghosts, covered in dust and grime, stumbling into the governor's stately office just hours before he was scheduled to leave. His secretary looked at them with disgust, ready to throw them out. Please, Catherine said, her voice hoarse, handing him her father's letter. Just give this to him. The secretary disappeared. When he returned, his face was pale. The governor will see you now. Governor Davis was a man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He read the letter, his expression softening. Robert Mitchell, he said quietly. He saved my life at Antietam. He told me I owed him a debt. What can I do for his daughter? They laid it all out, the coal, Blackwood's threats, the ambush. Benjamin presented the core samples, his geological assessment clear and brilliant. The governor listened, his expression hardening with every word. When they were finished, he stood and walked to the window. For a long moment he was silent. Catherine's hope began to fade. Then he turned back, a grim, determined look on his face. Men like Carson Blackwood are a cancer on this territory, and he said, they believe that power and money give them the right to break the law and crush good people. It's time they were reminded that no one is above the law. He sat at his desk and began to write, his pen scratching furiously. He issued an executive directive, placing Catherine's mineral claim under his personal, expedited review, bypassing any local officials Blackwood might control. He dispatched a unit of territorial marshals to Riverbrook with warrants to investigate Carson Blackwood and his men for armed intimidation and attempted murder. Then he looked at Benjamin. And as for Barrett Mining, he said, they are currently the subject of a federal investigation for the very practices you described, Mr. Hayes. Your testimony would be invaluable. I am appointing you a special territorial consultant. This will grant you official protection from any legal harassment. In the span of 10 minutes, the governor had not just leveled the playing field. He had flipped the entire board. When they rode back into Riverbrook, they didn't have to hide. They rode down the main street, the governor's directives tucked safely in Catherine's saddlebag. They arrived at the ranch to find Martha waiting, a huge grin on her face. The sheriff was just here, she said. He served Carson Blackwood with a warrant. Blackwood is selling his ranch. He's leaving the territory. Something about a federal investigation back east. It was over, just like that. The monster that had terrorized the valley was gone. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. With the governor's backing, Catherine and Benjamin secured a partnership with an ethical mining company. The deal was everything they had hoped for. The ranch was safe. The future was secure. One evening, they stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky. The air was filled with the promise of spring. Our partnership agreement is technically complete, Catherine said softly. You're free to go, Benjamin. Your reputation is restored. The world is open to you. He turned to her, the setting sun catching the kindness in his eyes. I've found that my world has become surprisingly small lately, he said. It seems to be contained entirely within the boundaries of the Mitchell Ranch. He took a step closer, and its remarkable owner. She had sent for a husband to provide a strong back and calloused hands. She had expected a farmer, a laborer. Instead, she got a hero. I was thinking, she said, a smile finally reaching her eyes, a real smile, full of hope. The ranch could use a permanent partner, someone with specialized knowledge. Are you proposing a new business arrangement, Miss Mitchell? He asked, his own smile mirroring hers. I'm proposing, she said, her voice full of a confidence she hadn't felt in years, that we stop talking about business. The man who had stepped off the train, a frail disappointment with a secret, had not just saved her ranch. He had saved her. He had shown her a future she never could have imagined, a future built not on desperation, but on courage, integrity, and a partnership forged in fire. He was not the husband she thought she wanted, but he was the man she now knew she needed. And together, they were just getting started. If you enjoyed this story of justice and unexpected love, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss the incredible story we have coming for you tomorrow. And check out the 2 amazing stories on your screen right now. I promise you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching.